And approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? And are there any additions, subtractions, adjustments to said minutes for February 10th? None? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from February 10th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. All right, the ayes have it and the minutes are approved.
Hey, Tim, do we want to go back and open up the public forum?
That's new to me, Mike. I assumed that was just her turning on the,
No, that's an opportunity for the public to speak if they want to.
okay. I apologize. So we'll go back and open up for public forum.
I don't have anyone raising their hand to speak.
Is there anyone else on the call?
Frank was or is. There's a few others that are on there too.
Okay.
All clear, it looks.
Does anybody from the public want to speak now or move along to other business? Take it that's a no.
Correct.
Okay. We will close the public forum segment then and move on to the Luxair report. And I know that Tom sent it out, but if Steve wants to give it in his own words, that's fine. Steve, if you want to, be great.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. So, yeah, it was a cold and miserable month. So we didn't have too much going on as far as operations, but we did get started on some of the derecho repairs. The T-hangers are getting 6 new doors, redoing the siding and the roof. Most of that's done. I believe we're just waiting on some electricians to finish a few things up, and then that will be done. We're also going to be starting construction soon on replacing the 2 private hangars that were knocked down. And then, yeah, we're still having a fair amount of people call about having some sort of courtesy car or something. I know we had one guy show up that was planning on using Uber, but just couldn't find anybody because I guess there weren't any Uber drivers around at the time. So something to keep thinking about. And I also recently saw, so it's not on the report, but we do have one runway light that has been knocked down. And from what I remember, we also had one runway light that hasn't been fixed from the derecho damage because they were waiting on parts. So maybe somebody has an update on when we'll have those parts. Yeah, and that is what I got.
Does anybody have any questions for Steve or any comments
Question on
regarding
the
his
vehicle.
report?
Yeah, question on the vehicle. Is it a liability issue? Can't we just get an expired, retired police car or something out there?
I know that's what we had talked about before. I know that Luxair is concerned about a liability issue where there wouldn't be one. I believe if the city is the one that owned and operated it, I believe.
Okay.
Somebody from the city want to respond? I have no idea on any of that.
I mean, I think we can, we'd have to find one, but it's, I think it would be insured. I don't know how it would be insured. I mean, we have to look into see how it's insured and where that liability falls, but I don't know, Lon, what your thoughts on that but.
I can only speak to my experience with it with my last city that had an airport. We actually went away from it because the issue that we had is that even though the city had it and insured it, like all of our city employees, we do driver's license verification every year to ensure that, you know, someone doesn't just hop out of a plane and hop into a car that the city owns and has a suspended license or has had it revoked or something like that. So we really shied away from it. We actually have worked out a deal with a car dealership that they just provided a decent condition used vehicle because their insurance was more amenable to those types of things than ours was for loaner vehicles.
I do have a little bit of experience with this that and it hasn't been, every time I've used a maintenance facility, they're the ones that I've gotten that's provided the vehicle, the courtesy car. But you know, that's a private entity that I've been dealing with, but that's my experience with using them. It's usually a maintenance shop, but
It would just, off the top of my head, it would make sense that if the city had one, we could, you know, it goes through Gov Deals or .gov and is sold. They don't go for much. I don't know that it could be donated. I don't know if that could be, because I think it probably needs to function as a part of Luxair, as a piece to that puzzle. I mean, from the lease agreement, they're leasing the FBO and providing, I don't know that a city can provide a car that someone can just toss somebody else the key and go drive around in. So I think there's probably got to be some kind of waivers, or, I mean, it may be different for a private entity that could have the car, hold the insurance, they insure it, they know what's going on. Be like me handing my key to you, Tim. It's a little different than if I hand you the keys to the city car or my business car. There's a lot more things that calls into play. So, you know, there may be other ways to get the car into the hands out there, but I think that's probably the piece that someone's got to manage it. I mean, if it breaks down, the city's not going to send public services out to take care of it or whatever. So,
yeah.
But
I would just think that that's a function of the FBO and not the city who's running the run, taking care of the runway.
For the pilots in the group, are courtesy cars common at the places that you fly into?
Yes.
Yeah, they're common, but usually, like, if you use a courtesy car, they, you know, it's because you're buying fuel or you're using the maintenance services or something of that kind of ilk. I mean, it's, you know, you're doing something, you're having some sort of a business transaction with that entity, and whether it be the city or whoever. But that's what I've.
When Perry had it, there was always a car out there.
Barely a car, really. I think the last one that I got in that Perry owned had 22 bullets in where the fuses went. So, and I'm not even joking.
Was it one of the Yugos?
Yeah, my wife ended up driving it before they took it to the salvage yard, and she's like, "Why are there all these bullets on the floor?" I said, "Those are the fuses." Yep. So.
It is, it's unusual for Marion not to have a vehicle available, and it really runs the gamut. I'm sure I've seen the situation where there's a magnetic sticker on the side of the car that's from a local car dealer. They're just providing some kind of a car. And then I know I've driven like the FBO owner's car that he drove to work and then I drove to lunch. Or I've driven some real wrecks, and I know you guys have too. I mean, basically you need something to be able to get into town, go to Burger King, you know, and come back out to the airport. And so it doesn't have to be anything all that great. But it's pretty much anytime that I've wanted a car, there's always one there, except when there's not. And when there's not, it's not because they don't have a car, it's because somebody else is using it. So it's a little weird. It's a little weird not to have one, but it doesn't have to be anything special.
Yeah, I don't know if the car is the issue. It just sounds like it's the liability. I mean, you can have
Agreed.
a complete wreck.
Right. You want something that runs, but like the airport's got mechanics. Can't they, like, isn't a car just an airplane without wings?
You'd think so, but
Fuel, air, and spark, man, to keep it running. Not that hard.
yeah, like I
gear
said, I
doesn't
don't
even
think the
retract.
car is the problem, and I don't think maintaining it's the problem. I think it's just the liability. So,
But that's just an insurance thing. Though I suspect what happens a lot is when I'm driving the owner's car, it's just his car. And
Yeah,
he's loaning his buddy his car. It's not a business transaction at all. That's my guess.
If I may, gentlemen.
There's a lot of issues.
Discussion,
There's a
but it's-
lot of issues with this insurance deal.
Sure.
It's
You
not
guys,
an
when you're
item.
borrowing someone else's car, that's registered as a private passenger vehicle. And even though there's not a transaction, that is a commercial exposure, that car is uninsured at that point. This whole issue of liability is a reinsurance issue, just like Lon had mentioned earlier. On commercial fleet vehicles, there's thorough background checks on all the drivers. The reinsurance carrier will raise the rates because they cannot control who the drivers are. I would be strongly against bringing on a vehicle. It's not the vehicle itself, it's the liability that comes with it. You are now engaging in a transaction, if even borrowing it. If you're going to set that up, then it should really look like an enterprise or something like that. There should be a contract on that, because you don't know if the driver also carries personal insurance on their end of the deal. There's uninsured, underinsured categories. There's bodily injury, liability, umbrellas, reinsurance issues. This thing just goes on and on and on. And I don't think it's going to be a worthwhile process in going forward with that. At best, I would say let's contract with somebody and provide a taxi service on a delivery by delivery basis. To have a vehicle and all of that overhead expense, it will be thousands of dollars to whoever decides to sign that contract.
and honestly, Randy, I agree. I think this is like kind of old school thinking with a lot of like people that were playing fast and loose with the rules, and you know, they played fast and loose until they got in trouble. And I mean, I don't think I've never heard of anything like seriously bad happen, but I could see where it could. So.
Sure. And again, too, we don't, you always have to just kind of prepare for the worst, because a judgment brought against a bodily injury or a fatality will be the driver, the insured, and the owner of that vehicle. So those are the three entities in a lawsuit. So when we bring all those back together again, we just have to really ask ourselves, is it really worth, going down that road with it at this point anyway?
Yep. And I'm not advocating for anything that I described necessarily, but I am accurately describing driving dozens of cars in a lot of different places. And I've literally The first few times it just blew me away because I pull in, I buy a little bit of fuel, and I said, "You got a car? We want to drive into town for gas." And they hand me keys, and I drive away. And I come back and I hand them the keys. I always put gas in their car just to be nice, and no harm, no foul, and everything's done. But I completely get somebody in there has everything on the line, and they're rolling the dice every time, and I wouldn't say they're getting lucky. I think they're probably just, it's just, the bad things very seldom ever happen. So they,
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to come across so harsh. I totally
Yeah.
get it. And my dad was an avid flyer back in the day, and I remember some of those courtesy things. That's just the Midwest mentality. But unfortunately, in our day and era of lawsuits and everything that go and play with that, it's just critical that everybody understands that process. There's also another endorsement that can be put on things, but it's called hired and non-owned auto coverage. But again, too, when somebody's tossing those keys to you, just as those of you that are borrowing those cars, be very, very careful that you thoroughly understand how that works, because you are bringing yourself back into that personal liability factor. So if that car you're borrowing, hypothetically, worst case scenario is it is not insured, you become the secondary payer on that judgment. So your personal insurance will get involved with it, and that'll be a litigation nightmare because you're crisscrossing private passenger insurance over to commercial insurance. Those are totally two different living, breathing documents when it comes to state and federal law.
Sure.
So just be careful. I'm just trying to give you a little advice there. Common courtesy of tossing the keys across the desk and say, "Sure, here, borrow my car." It seems to be very honest and not a big deal, but just be aware and be careful with that, because you don't know it until it happens.
I would,
Yeah, and then I would just join the whoever the plaintiff is in that. I would join their side against the airport and their insurance, and that would solve that whole problem. I don't have anything.
Well, I want to,
But I don't think the city should own this car. That's my thing. I think the city could conveniently provide it, and if the city owned the airport and the city owned the FBO and was just renting it out to Luxair, then also providing the car because it's convenient for the city to do it could be a part of that formula. But under the current arrangement, I think it's in Luxair's camp. If they want to have a car, and I think they should have one, then they need to figure that out.
I want to ask Ryan what his full-time occupation is, but I think I have a pretty good idea at this point.
Yeah,
Just saying.
And
Just
folks, as
guess.
robust as the, sorry, Tim, but as robust as the discussion has been, this is not an agenda item. I mean, it's kind of associated with the report, and we're now 20 minutes into the meeting and haven't really
Correct.
got through.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, I
maybe
brought it.
focus.
Sorry, I brought it up.
it's the most fun we'll have all night. That's all right.
I apologize. Okay, so that's enough of that. Now I'm going to cut things short. Going to the chairman's report, I've got something I'm working on. I'm not quite there yet. I'm fact checking. So what I have, I'll save until next month. So we'll move on to the items for discussion and or action, the Iowa DOT grant discussion. Is that you, Tom?
I'm deferring to
Mike.
Mike.
Okay,
Yeah.
Mike.
Try and share my screen here. So what we did was the CIP that was put together earlier, and I'll try and make it a little bigger here. Maybe. Can you guys see that or not?
Yeah, it's fine here.
So what Jane did was, in the order that we had before that we prioritized the projects, she looked at what we could possibly apply for the DOT grant. And I believe this is due in May. So basically the ones that are crossed off, we cannot apply for, because for the DOT grant, for example, the beacon, even though we would likely put it on, say, the FBO, even though it's a lease space, because it's not owned by the city, we cannot put it on that property and get DOT funding because they want it to be secured, similar to why they wouldn't pay for the runway improvements until we got the zoning in place, because they wanted to make sure that investment was being protected. So Jane went through this and marked off all the ones that we cannot do at this time and left the ones. So you can see number 4 is power lines buried for runway 17 approach. Number 11 is the approach, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Number 12 is the RPZ property acquisition. 14 is Papier the Vassy. And then we get into economic impact studies and some stuff that's farther down the line. So I just wanted to open it up to discussion if there's anything that the committee felt was a priority to apply for funding for the DOT. Now that we've actually expended some money, they may give us a grant versus I know the past couple times they didn't because we had so many outstanding grants, but now that we've spent that money. So we just need direction. If A, you want to apply, then we would do a recommendation to city council to apply. And then what do you want to apply for?
Mike, just if I put my city council hat on this evening, wouldn't the natural order of priority remain the same since we've pretty well scrubbed this list?
I would assume so, but I never make that assumption.
Yeah, I think we vetted this list pretty well last time or the time before, and I think it's just a natural. I mean, if number 4 is the top that we can do, then number 4 is it, right? I mean, I don't see why we'd go for number 11, unless you wanted to do more than one.
What kind of dollar amount is the max we can ask for?
So I want to say the biggest one that we got was actually for the runway improvements, and that was almost $500,000.
On a percentage share, John, I think 85% is the maximum we can apply for.
Okay, that sounds correct. I assume, the DOT has limited funds. I assume they have funds available.
What's the deadline for this?
I believe this is the last meeting that we'll have before the applications would be due. So we would need direction today if we wanted to apply this. I know Tom pulled it up before. I want to say it's late April or early May.
I think we may have changed it to May 6th, but I mean,
It's May 6th, yeah.
yeah.
And is it that the case the Quonset hut is gone, right?
No, it is still there.
Oh, so it's not the little one that was on the northwest corner, is not what we're talking about?
So I believe what the Quonset hut that's still there, we did get some quotes for it, but it is still standing. It has a few things in it. I think maybe the door got damaged with derecho, but derecho did not take that structure.
Medco did demolish theirs that was on the west side of the runway. It's the one that was next to the old FBO building. So it's like more of the northeast.
You're saying that the one that's on this list is the one next to the old FBO building?
Yes, because that's the one that's on the city property.
Is there a time advantage of like going after the approach first? I mean, if we go for the approach first, I mean, what's the time frame from the contract?
So The way that I understand the grant is we would have to wait for the DOT to say yes or no on that. So we would have to be in a holding pattern until we could start any work on the approach until DOT says, yes, you're good to go. So you can't spend.
What
before you
do
have
you
an-
think that time frame is?
I'd have to lean on Lon or somebody with the last series of grants that we did and how long it took DOT to get back to us.
I think they made the announcements around August, as I recall.
On the approach stuff, are we realistically thinking about starting to spend money on that before then?
I guess my point is on the time frame is if it takes 3 years to develop an approach to be published, wouldn't you want to spend the money on that right off the bat instead of worrying about the power lines that are going to get in the way of the approach? Or does that not sound logical? I mean, if it takes 3 years to develop an approach and we can spend the money or get the money to spend to start developing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be devil's advocate. Let's say that you decide that you want to apply for the approach. You wait till August, DOT tells you no, you just delayed the project for no reason. So,
Right.
you get the money too. So it's.
But they could actually decline our application for burying the power lines too as well, right?
Correct. They're going to
So-
look at all the projects that are submitted and they're going to pick the ones that they feel are the most bang for the buck.
And that's why I was asking about kind of realistically what the schedule, like, I don't know where, if we weren't talking about this grant application, I don't have a concept of where this money comes from anyway. And so can we literally come out of tonight's meeting looking at the approach stuff and say, yeah, we want to go forward, and then by May, we are actually spending money to get this work done?
So when we bonded for it, and Lon, again, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but we bonded for additional money. So we should already have that in the coffers that could be started as soon as we got direction to move forward and had a contract signed.
Okay.
And there appears to be, I mean, in the notes there, issues as to, it looks a little dicey as to whether they would approve it anyway.
Yeah, with her comments that we applied in 19 and 20, but again, that also could have been because we already had several grants with them and we were not spending that money. So in their mind, why give the city of Marion more grants if they're not spending the money that we've already awarded them?
It appears to me it's August when that's what I'm seeing. When they approved the state aviation program.
And then I'm guessing it would go through council to sign the contract. So it'd be maybe a month after that.
Mike, is it Alliant who would bury those lines?
Yeah, there might be some franchise utilities, some telecommunications on there as well. But yeah, I believe those are Alliant lines.
And what would you expect that project's lead time would be before it is actually active?
I'm not sure. I know I have told them that it's in the hopper, but I know right now they're doing some other utility work for 10th and 10th that took some time for them to get out there. So I know those aren't the huge lines, but they're also not small lines either.
Sure. What was the lead time on 10th and 10th?
It was a year.
Okay.
There's also a derecho in there as well.
So I guess just to share what my thinking is on this, everybody on the committee would have to give the final view on this. From my vantage point, item number 4 and number 11 are flight safety related. And I think they each have their own unique criticality. I'm a little sensitive to the power lines and the exposure that that provides to inbound and outbound air traffic, just because of my experience in the utility business. But given if that has potentially a year or more lead time, and as Mike just commented on, and I'm waiting for Lon to electronically kick me in the shins, but if we have money that is built into our budget to begin some work on the approach, that seems smart. And then maybe if it's an August timeframe, we hear something from DOT about the potential of maybe allocating grant funds to number 4, that still doesn't degrade the overall completion of that project, given the lead time that Alliant might have. Did any of that make sense?
Yep, I agree with you. I do anyway.
I do as well, and I think we had that at number 4 for a reason, and but I think that's perfectly good logic.
Do we?
Yeah, I have to agree with Grant on that as well.
Do we throw 14, the Pappy and Vassy in there just as a, why not?
I would think so. Those kinds of things are all related.
Yeah, I don't think we're depending on them for the approach necessarily. And to the extent that they would somehow help reduce minimums or whatever, that can be modified after the fact.
Plus the DOT would be favorable if we were moving ahead on the approach and then they were looking at other projects. That's all.
Yeah, that is the nice thing about number 4 and number 14 is that they're not, I don't think they're like dependent on anything else, and nothing else depends on them.
Mike, is that cost identified on number 4? Is that a real number, or is that just an estimate? Did we get estimates or quotes on that?
So that's an estimate from Anderson Bogert. I don't think we have got one from Alliant yet, but it's at least a budget number.
Is it safe to say it's probably a safe number then?
With the available information that we have today, yes.
And could
Fair
you
enough.
identify one as like, this is our request A and request B. If we can't get A, then we'll take B, or vice versa. If you request both.
We can talk to Jane about that if you guys want to apply for both. I don't know if you get to choose. They may choose and say they pick the Pappy or Vassy over the power lines. I don't know if they would do that or not. Again, I wasn't part of the grant process before, so I can't speak to that.
Sorry, I was if Jane was on, she's not, because that would be kind of a question to get her input on as far as having multiples in. I have seen some have several applications in at the same time, but they're usually for kind of different categories, where one might be for a physical improvement and one might be for planning or technical assistance. So they aren't necessarily competing directly head to head.
Yeah, Jane's unfortunately on vacation. Otherwise, she'd be here. So, I mean, if you guys want to give us a motion of what you want, we can talk to Jane and see what's possible and do it as close to that as possible. But
I guess I'd move that we pursue the power lines and the PAPI both, and then construct the application in whatever way seems best.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
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 Right here.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries.
all right, I will stop sharing.
All right, so let's move on. Scope of work proposed by HDR. Who's speaking to that? Is that another Mike? No.
I could, he still wants to just say Tom, didn't he? You know, at the last meeting, I think we talked about bringing on HDR and having them assist us with some of the legwork surrounding just the general operations at the airport. They provided a scope of services. This is a draft scope. And you can see kind of at that level, we're talking about 3 different topics. And I know it's identified as a cost benefit. And it's really just it's just a consultant services document. And so, you know, it kind of outlined where we are, discussed some of the items that they're going to work to assist us with. You know, I think in the past, we've talked about numerous activities that need to get accomplished. And I think Jerry with HDR would be that asset that could help us, you know, kind of get some of those general documents and outlines in place. Really, I think what we were looking at from the group today was, you know, take a peek at that. We know it's not in final format, but you know, we'd be hoping to take this to the city council and get them and get HDR on board with the project. And that way we have some expertise that can kind of help with some of even the conversations we're having today. What's happened at other airports? How was a courtesy car handled in another airport? You know, I think some of those even minutia type items could be helped with having someone with such experience at airports on retainer. So didn't know if there was any questions or concerns from that, but we were hoping to move that to the city council for approval and get Jerry on board to assist us.
I'm very much in favor with that. I thought he was very knowledgeable. So that's my comment.
Did he give us a timeline? How long, something like that? But there was a lot in there. How long it would take?
You know, he put a year on it. It talked about a year commitment. You know, him and I talked about it, and just like tonight, the courtesy car conversation. That's probably not the best example, but I'm sure the other thing, you know, the land donation conversation. Like, I mean, I think he's going to provide some assistance with that. So, you know, it's going to be there'll probably be things that pop in and out of what we work with him on. So, but he does have resources, you know, outside of him if necessary, coming from a larger company. So I think really the direction we're looking for is a motion to proceed with, or motion recommending the councils proceed with contract with HDR.
I motion that we proceed with a contract with HDR.
A second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion is carried.
Perfect.
Moving on, land donation proposal from Luxair.
I think it's Lon's turn now. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Unless he's gonna say, Tom, you handle it.
No. So the city received a land donation proposal from Luxair, and it was included with the packet for everybody to take a look at. So this is one of the first things that we would like to have our contractor with HDR really help us walk through and work through the different pieces that would come with doing something like this. You know, at first blush, it looks like it could provide some advantages to the community as far as, you know, looking down the list of projects that are not eligible for DOT funding assistance because they're not on city property. It could iron out some of those different idiosyncrasies. But one of the things we want to ensure is that, you know, if we're going to go through a process like that, that we're doing it correctly. Just in quick conversations with Jerry, he came up with a couple of alternatives that we should also look at, and to make sure that we have a full understanding of what liabilities we'd be taking on with those assets as well. So at this point, you know, we wanted the committee to be aware of it, and what we were asking for is same thing that we've done with the city council, is what questions do you have, things that you would like to know, pieces of information that you would need in order to be able to ultimately work with the consultant and then make a recommendation to the city council on whether the city should proceed with this, negotiate something a little bit different, and how something like that could be moved forward. So at this point, we want to get a sense from the questions that you as members of the airport committee would like to have answered as we go through the process of review. Not asking for them tonight, but to have you start putting them together and then filter them into us. And then as we hopefully get Jerry on board with HDR, he'll put together the process for how we will walk through doing the analysis.
Lon, that would probably require the lease to be renegotiated as well, would it not?
Yeah, the lease has got a lot of things in it, I think, that are specifically tied to the way the property is currently done. And I think that would be something that we would want to make sure we did as well.
Are there any historical examples of other, let's say, maybe farmers donating land to airports or airport commissions or city councils that we know of that possibly we could get some history on?
I think that's an area, Phil, that, and I don't want to oversell him, but I think that Jerry could be very helpful to us. He's been involved with the development of over 40 airports across the state, including the one in Ankeny, at really all phases of development. So has a good sense of the history and the different ways that those types of things can come together.
I see. Thank you.
And I think the upshot of it is just to go back to kind of the history of the whole, you know, initial acquisition of the airport. Everything was started when we tried to do this was to try to do this really in some ways as an experiment to see if a different business model would work in the aviation industry. Almost virtually every other airport and certainly every airport of scale or size in Iowa is owned by the municipality or owned by an authority. And we wanted to see, could we do one where the city could put forth minimum necessary effort, own the minimal amount of assets, and leave the rest to the private sector to be able to develop and build the aviation industry around it. And what the last couple of years have really shown us, the ratio and coronavirus aside, is that those airports are so heavily subsidized that it's virtually impossible to make up the difference on the private sector side, especially with the way the county has put the tax classification together. So if the airport's going to continue, I think we do need to look at some other models or some other changes. But I think having somebody to guide us through that process and to help figure out where's the line where we should have city versus private sector will be very valuable this time around.
Well, that certainly makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Does anybody have any other comments or questions for Lon or city staff? Okay. Well, moving on to the last item in the agenda, and you're going to have to help me out with this. Receive and file requests for proposals. I have no idea what that means even.
So this is receive and file the approach proposals. So we received one from Hughes Aerospace, which I sent you via a separate email link, and also the email from Boeing saying that they would not be providing one. So you have one proposal to pick from. So I didn't know, based on the timeline, and you haven't had a lot of time to look at it. Obviously, there's some numbers there towards the end of it. If that's something you want to discuss tonight or wanted time to look it over, eventually what we would do is we would proceed with Hughes if that's who we wanted to proceed with. We would tell them we want everything included on this page, or we want A, B, and C, and we would have them put together a contract that would ultimately come to this committee, and then go to city council for approval, and then the process starts. But we need to know from this what you want to do from this point.
Is it, I realize we only have one response here, but do we need to say, okay, we're accepting this one and then moving forward? Is that kind of the formal thing that we have to do?
So yeah, what we would typically do if it was the roundabout one that I gave you to start off with, from that our selection committee would review it. We would choose which engineering firm we felt was most qualified. We would then go ahead and I would correspond with that consultant to get a scope of services put together. And once we were happy with that scope of services, if we could agree on the numbers, then we would come to council and say, this is who we recommend having a partnership with, and here's the contract. We recommend approval. So it'd be something similar here. You guys are part of the selection committee. Lon and Tom and myself are also on it to review this. But again, we only have one to pick from, so that makes that part easy. So we're not, picking A or B company. There's only one company to pick from. It's more based on their pricing table. What is it that's needed? And that I'm going to have to lean on the pilots because I don't know. And basically, what do we want to proceed with so we can notify Hughes that we want to have a contract with you? We want A, B, and C to be included and write us a scope of services.
And you don't necessarily need that part of it tonight as far as going through the numbers that they provided, because part of this is to have them enter into more of a discussion with us of what each of these things means, and in order to help us determine what we want, right?
But I probably would want to have the entire committee. I mean, we could invite them to a committee meeting if you wanted to, but I don't know that you all want to meet with them. It would be more like, yeah, we like everything that's on here, write us a scope of services, and then we'll review that to see if it includes everything that we think it should.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we had a subcommittee, wasn't it? Greg and Bonnie and Tim that actually helped put this together.
Yeah, I mean, typically I don't have to have a bunch of meetings with the consultant afterwards. I tell them I want A, B, and C, write me a scope. I don't know if this is that,
Oh.
know that you want that, do you want to approach from each runway? Do you want helicopter approach? What is it that you actually want now that you see the numbers?
So I mean, it's going to be a GPS approach, and if we can get both ends of the runway, that would be the best course of action. I don't think we need a helicopter approach because helicopters can pretty much fly as low as they want to. I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty simple, but we don't have the equipment to do anything other than a GPS approach. So, and if we can get both ends, I mean, what else is there, really?
The only thing I think we put, or the reason I included the copter approach as an option is that last I knew we had helicopters based there, but I don't know what the relative value is. I don't even know if a helicopter can fly maybe helicopters can fly a regular GPS approach. I don't even know.
Well, the helicopters there are Lifeline, and they don't fly unless they have their own set of minimums. And I don't think it matters if they have an approach or not. Bonnie could probably answer the question better than me, but
no, they require VFR. If it drops below 1,000 feet, they don't fly.
Okay.
Well, it's our discussion just to even file the document we have, and then, have this conversation with a subcommittee and you, Mike, or, is that what you're looking for?
We can, however you guys want to do it. I just need to know what you want to do.
I think that we can, so the only viable, and I use that term very loosely, alternative to this is that we look at this and laugh and say, oh, we can do this for a lot less money than that. And we throw it completely out of the window. And then we try to do all of the work ourselves, working with, local survey people and working with local, working directly with the FAA and all that kind of stuff. And I just don't think that's really a viable choice. So if we want an approach, if that's a priority, and I believe that it is, then this seems to be the course to go down. It sounds like we're saying, hey, let's toss out the copter option. Let's not worry about that. The departure and arrival procedures, it just says as required. And so we'll learn more as they get into the actual details of designing the approaches. They may recommend something, or they may say, no, it's entirely optional. And, and we can decide on that as it comes up. I don't know that there's any other decisions to necessarily be made in here.
Nope. What it's going to be, and honestly, this is answer that. I mean, speak clearly. I guess it's going to be a GPS approach down to probably LPV level, either one end or the other. And I don't think there's going to be an arrival or departure procedure. It'll be just standard, and that'll be it. I mean,
yep. And that's all they're
pretty simple.
Saying. That's all they're saying here.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, I don't think there's nothing in here that's. The only thing I don't know what ARINC 424 initial coding is, but I suspect it's part of. I think it's part of charting. I don't know. Doesn't look optional, whatever it is.
Well, I think what Mike needs is just a motion to receive the RFP and refer it to subcommittee for further review. Is that what you need, Mike?
Yeah, but and I agree with that, except that part about referring to subcommittee for further review. I think that the subcommittee, who is all right here, is saying, look, I'll make a motion to accept it and refer it on and opt out of the helicopter approach and move ahead with the next steps.
I would agree with that. I think we could expedite this process. I don't think there's any more discussion to really be had other than let's move on, honestly.
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
There was the discussion on maintenance. I didn't quite understand that. Did you guys understand that?
So the FAA requires, there's a number of different things that are meant by maintenance. So there's actually an ongoing, literally daily maintenance process where somebody sits down and looks at everything that's going on and figures out, is somebody building a tower near the airport, or is somebody, put up a temporary crane, and how does that affect our approach? And do we need to file notices to airmen to let people know, hey, there's a crane that's right on the flight path. So there's that thing that's kind of an ongoing, continuous thing. And then there's periodic, the 540-day, what they call maintenance. It's basically looking at the procedures, given that time has passed and there might be a new building nearby, or there might be a road or some other obstacle. And what do we need to do to update the approach to account for things that have changed in the last 540 days?
Isn't that something though that zoning would handle? I mean,
yes, and that's the other part of that, is that before you get to the 540, you will have dealt with things on a daily basis, and you're not going to discover anything after 540 days that suddenly there's a skyscraper right in the approach path or something. It's just the FAA requires this 540-day thing, and so they're just saying it's going to cost that.
right.
But that's an annual expense, Craig?
It's 540 days, so it's.
Yeah, but it says annually. So we'll want to talk to them about it could be what they're saying is, you give us 18.5 a year and we will take care of all the periodic maintenance, and plus the 5,700 every 540 days for them to fly out and do the inspection part. And so it could be they're spreading the 540-day cost out over in annual payments. We'd want to ask them about that.
Hey, Tim. Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a question that came to mind. And Craig, your comments about the helicopter approaches, I got to wondering if those were developed, and they seem to be integral to the pricing they've given us. They haven't broken that out specifically, which suggests to me that as they do the core set of work, it's a natural extension to include the helicopter approaches. I guess I'm asking sort of a long-term or a vision question here. Would it be to our advantage to have those helicopter approaches included in this initial work effort, and for the purposes of making the assumption that might be an attractive feature to the airfield that would then drive additional air traffic in and out of the Marion Airport?
Here, I guess I got a question back, and for pilots out there, I guess I don't even know. The Cedar Rapids have helicopter approaches?
I'm not aware of any, but I wouldn't know where to look for them. I wouldn't know where to look for them. That'd be something we could have lifeguard.
Yeah,
don't
we'll
know.
have to ask somebody, but from what I've learned from helicopter pilots is that they never intend to get in the weather if they can help it. They're strictly state VFR, especially if they're Lifeline or some sort of a corporate entity. They generally don't have the equipment, really. But it's something we can look into. Any other pilots hear anything? I mean, have you ever heard of this? Or every helicopter pilot I've ever heard just says we just go either below it or we don't fly. But
Well, they exist. I mean, the approach
they
exists.
exist, yes.
And so, and I can't find FlightAware. There it is, or ForeFlight. But Cedar Rapids might have them. I just don't remember ever seeing them. I'm not seeing helicopter approaches at Cedar Rapids.
I've never seen them on there. I've never seen them on any airport I've ever been into.
I haven't looked for them. So I think, Grant, it's fair to say that a lot of the baseline work, so part of the kind of the non-optional portions of this price is the IFR digital geo-reference charting. Nope, that isn't it. It's the survey stuff. So the point is, where I was going is that there's portions of this that are going to get spent, and then helicopters incremental, and it's shown as an incremental cost on here. It's listed under optionals or under options. And I think maybe your question is more like, if we do it now, that might only be 28.5 extra. If we do it 2 years from now, do we have to redo a bunch of this stuff? And does it turn out to be 48.5 instead of 28.5 because we're redoing a bunch of stuff? And I don't think it would be that bad. And part of it is because this is a living thing. So once you get it done, it's got this ongoing maintenance and ongoing observation and ongoing, like, do we need to change it and whatnot? And so then if you decided, hey, let's do helicopter, like, you're already sitting here with the surveys already done. Anything that's new since the survey has been added to it. Oh yeah, it's the second item on here, FAA conforming GIS runway obstacle survey. That's a big deal thing at 14.5. And that's going to be like continuously updated. And so I don't know that it's going to be a giant incremental difference if we would put it off and do it 5 years from now. But it's a good question to ask. And I think what I'm hearing from others is that I don't think we need it. There's no helicopter operators out there saying, boy, we'd sure like it if you guys would develop a instrument approach for us.
Well, Craig, I just looked up in the FAR AIM, and it says helicopters are capable of flying any published 14 CFR Part 97 approach, standard instrument approach, which they are properly equipped, subject to the following limitations, which are just their equipment, blah, blah, blah. So.
Right. But completely anecdotal, but Kobe Bryant's helicopter could have filed IFR.
Right, they're out there, yeah.
Yep. Okay, did we get a second on our motion?
Thought I heard one.
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
So just to be clear, what was the original motion?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
That's why I didn't vote.
The motion was to accept this proposal and move it forward without the optional copter approach.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
That's what,
We probably did not do that correctly.
What didn't we do?
Well, I mean, I think it was basically based on the discussion. I don't know if we actually, there was a motion, but
I made the motion.
you made the motion.
And, yep, and you and Bonnie agreed, but didn't formally second.
Okay.
And so then we got a second, and then we continued discussion. Always
Yeah, I
remember,
know.
it's Craig's rules of order, not Robert's rules. So
So
we
we're
did
agreeing to the
fine.
one, we're agreeing to the 158,875.
Technically, I would say no. We're agreeing to these tasks, and we move forward to talk to the vendor, right?
Yeah, so basically what I would do next is I would say they like everything except for the helicopter approach. Go ahead and put a scope of services together, which is a legal contract, similar to what the HDR one is, but it would be for this. And then that would come back to the committee. And then based on that, you would approve that, and that would go to city council to then approve, and then the work would start.
it's in our budget proposal so far.
Mhm.
Okay.
So Mike, on that schedule, council won't see it until the latter half of April.
Yeah, it'll depend on how quickly they get it back to us, but they would have to get the scope back to me. That would have to go to another airport committee meeting for that recommendation, and then as soon as that happens, I can put it on city council.
So we have another opportunity to look at the final costs and schedule.
Yep. And when we do proposals, we ask for those dollars just so we know that we're in the ballpark. You know, if this was 300,000, maybe it's a different conversation of, is there some optional stuff in there that we need to cut in order to get within budget? You know, that's why we ask for the dollar amounts. And then we can typically tell if a consultant is way off. Usually there's a group of them in the middle, and there's one that's really cheap and really expensive, so you can kind of throw out the outliers.
We done then?
Anything else?
I move we adjourn.
Let's adjourn.
All right,
Have a good night.
bye.
Hey, Karen, don't let the wind blow you away.
Thank you all.